Gen Z is coming. And if you think about how they were raised, it was this very participatory world, whether school projects, social media, gaming, they're giving their feedback and shaping outcomes in real time. Imagine as that person then joining the work world and decisions are made behind closed doors. Emails sound like directives. Sometimes meetings are these monologues. There's going to be this mismatch. So my advice for leaders is co-create. Think input and involvement from this group rather than waiting till they're promoted to a certain level.
Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Johnston. And as you all know, this is the podcast where we explore seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that we work and the way that we live. Y'all, we have a huge congratulations to our guest today. Selena Rezvani just launched on Monday her fourth book, which is called Quick Leadership. And let me tell you, so many great nuggets in this book, and I can't wait to dive in. Welcome, Selena.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'm a big fan of this show, so congrats on all your success.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, quick leadership. So when I was, looking at all of your amazing stuff that you have going on, all of your books, all of your viral TikToks, your Today Show appearances, Oprah, like, girl, you got it going on. How did you get here? Tell us your story.
Sure. Well, I'm obsessed with reducing suffering at work. And I want to tell you how I got that way. And it's a pretty personal story. But I grew up the daughter of a workaholic. My dad was an apparel executive, and he was consumed by work on Saturdays and Sundays, distracted on weeknights. And to top it all off, he had cardiac issues. And at one point, checked himself out of the hospital against medical orders to give a presentation. Like, really, Michelle, that actually happened. And really tragically, I lost him young. I was 13 when he passed from a major heart attack. And I really learned early on career success can come at the expense of things like health, well-being, the quality of your connections. So it's a big part of my mission today. That's really how I arrived where I am, to help people create sustainable careers, to have sustainable leadership, right? And model something that is healthy for employees working around the world. I have
Oh my gosh. What a great mission, Selena. I love it. And I'm so sorry you lost your dad so early. And you just remember vividly how much he worked.
Yes. And sometimes it's not even, picturing files and folders in a briefcase. It's this very far away, distracted look, where you can just tell someone's anxious about tomorrow's such and such, and so sometimes it was subtle, but it was always like a passenger with us.
Wow. So when you say you're on a mission to reduce suffering, tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, look, I want to empower teams. I want to build trust in organizations. I want to create environments where people feel seen and supported. I think we need more humanity in the workplace, more understanding. And so it's a big reason why I wrote this book, why I wrote Quick Leadership. I have an appreciation towards short, bite-sized things. And I think managers and leaders, they don't have a lifetime to learn leadership, So I wrote this with the idea of putting people first. It doesn't have to be slow, bureaucratic, overthought to death. There's small little actions we can do every day that can build trust, that can create those supportive environments. So that's what I'm all about. And I'm excited to get some early feedback on this book that it's helping people do that.
Oh my gosh, we are so aligned. Listeners, can you understand why I'm thrilled to have Selena on the show? I mean, you just spoke about connection and people needing and wanting to feel seen and heard, and leaders not having all of the tools and all the knowledge of how do I lead in this new era, right? I'm calling it, we need to rehumanize the
Yes.
workplace. Like, if not now, then when? Seriously, Selena, if not now, then when? So Marshall and I were just in London launching our book, The Seismic Shift in You, which is similar. And so we all can rise together. I don't feel that there is any competition in this arena at all. The more we talk about this, the better. So when you say quick leadership, and sometimes, I mean, we all have shorter attention spans, and leaders are inundated with what, not only the goals they're supposed to meet, but all the new people on their team. So give us some tips of quick leadership, things that they can do to adapt their leadership style right now.
Yes, there are so many great ones. But one thing you can do is not pretend you have all the answers, and this can be hard. A lot of us feel pressure that I should know the most. I should kind of be the oracle here. And I really challenge the leaders I coach, and I ask them to try out this exercise called Ask Three Before You Answer. So if someone comes to you with something, I have a client issue and I just don't know how to handle it. You could swoop in right away with the immediate solution, or you could ask them some questions, right? You could ask them things like, what have you tried so far? Or, what's a solution you're leaning towards? Or what is your gut sense of the best next step to take here? And the important thing there is you are building their muscles, right? Their problem solving muscles, their initiative and ownership. And I find people will remember you for that and they will appreciate that.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yes, I agree. And so many leaders struggle with listening. And I feel like if we can reframe it to say, asking questions. I mean, that's how it shows that you're a great listener, right? Because you're right. Leaders are trained that they're supposed to have all the right answers and they're supposed to fix any problem that somebody walks into their office with. And if we can help them reframe, like you absolutely said, when they come in or they hop on a Zoom and there's an issue, if you can ask those three questions, typically the employee has the answer within them, and it's so empowering. And that's one of the things. I was just on an episode, what was it called, Mojo Sessions, out of Australia. Really, really cool guy named Gary, and he asked amazing questions. And that is one of the things he said, what have you seen that really erodes connection these days? And I said exactly what you just said, micromanagement. It's when leaders they want to micromanage everything. And what does that do? That kills morale, right? It doesn't empower. Okay, so that's a great tip. So ask three questions when somebody comes in. Give us another quick leadership tip.
Yeah, here's another one, which is really give that praise like confetti. When somebody does something well, don't hoard the credit like it's your last cookie. That's how I say it. Be generous in giving praise when somebody does well. This might sound small to some people, but I'll never forget just in my late 20s, being a young consultant, working days, nights, and weekends on this like Excel spreadsheet type project. Every cell had been researched and verified. And I finally hand this thing in and I go to an offsite and my manager says the entire time in presenting it to the group, I led the full project. I figured out the best way to do this. I tackled the challenge by, and I felt so erased in that moment, and it stayed with me. And so in my book, Quick Leadership, I say to leaders, assume that people are walking around with these invisible signs on their head that say, see me, hear me, value me. And so when you see someone doing good, don't just throw them the generic, nice job. Really get specific, offer the details. I want to give you a shout out because you totally elevated that design. Like if it wasn't for your graphic, it wouldn't have delighted the client the way it did. you want to help them repeat it. So being generous, catching people doing good, and really deflecting the praise when you get it as a leader.
And you're right. And this is a real shift. This is a real shift. I feel like we have what hundreds and hundreds of years of institutional history, right? Of leaders thinking that it is about command and control and having all the right answers. And I don't want to soften my people by praising too
That's
much.
right.
And right. And so it's got to be based. Why do you think there is so much resistance to what you and I are advocating, this new style of connecting as a leader? Why do you think there's so much resistance and so much fear?
That's such a good question. I think that in some ways it's easier to armor up as a leader and say, I'm going to leave my soft side at home. I'm not going to kind of bring my humanity. I'll be more of the lieutenant when I come to work. I think it's harder. So I will give leaders that credit who are trying to integrate bring their full self into leadership. But people are craving that authenticity. Gen Z is going to be a third of the work population by 2030, and they are insistent on authenticity from their leaders. They want to hear about your mistakes. They want the unvarnished version of you. If there's a big corporate change that's rattling everyone, they want you to admit it's kind of rattling you too, rather than just put a gloss on everything. And so I think in some ways, we humans could compartmentalize maybe a little better in the past. And this is asking for more, but it is going to give people so much more.
Gosh, you're so right. I teach a leadership class still at Loyola. I've been a professor for years and years and years. And so I'm hanging on teaching one leadership class, and they're Gen Zs, right? They're all 21 years old, about to graduate. And yesterday during the lecture, we were talking about calendar management and how to own your calendar and make sure that the most important people in your life are on your calendar, making sure you prioritize yourself. And the old Michelle would have just continued on telling them what to do. And the more evolved Michelle as a leader who knows it's important to show up authentically, I gave a real personal story of how I hit rock bottom 2 summers ago and was so empty and so burned out. And it just caught me off guard because I thought I was doing everything right. I was giving, right? And I could tell as I was kind of pivoting from the typical lecture professor mode to, let me get real with you all. I sat at the ocean and could not speak, could not read. I had nothing in my tank. That is why calendar management is so important. You can't be good to others unless you're good to yourself first. So playing to what you're talking about, I recognize that it's even been hard for me, and I teach this stuff, right? Sometimes being vulnerable and being real and being personal is hard.
It's so hard. And I love that story. Like, you just transformed what could have been looked at as an admin task to, wow, something that has tremendous meaning in your life and can really drive the quality of your life. So I love that you did that. And I loved that you pushed through a little of that discomfort. I've certainly had the same thing. As an early speaker, I really armored up. I felt I should be the expert, whatever that means. And it took me a while to start telling my own stories, my face plants and mess ups and learnings and big aha moments. And as soon as I did, I felt such a different connection with the audience.
And I believe, because I looked at your TikToks, I think that's why they go viral, because you're so real.
Thank you.
You're talking. One of the ones that I saw prepping for this interview today was you just being really honest, looking at the camera saying, recently I just am losing my train of thought. I get up there and I think, and I just don't know where to. Do you all do that? Is that happening to you? If so, what are you doing? And I thought, I loved that. I loved how real you are.
Thank you so much.
And I would imagine that's why your TikToks are going viral, because people are like, oh my gosh, there's somebody who's successful, who's a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, and she's admitting that she's not perfect.
Wow. Well, thank you for saying that. And it's something I want to keep working on, because it's not always natural. It's not always my default setting to share. But boy, does it make a difference. And the same thing you're talking about, people see in leaders. They say there's no way an SVP of such and such, a CMO, has ever felt unsure of themselves, questioned their worth, felt stung by rejection. It's like we make this idea they had a golden path and they were like nominated in kindergarten to be a leader or something. But they have had doors slammed in their faces. And I never forget when a leader tells a story like that, a mess up, a time their thinking evolved and changed on something. Sometime they undercommunicated or assumed no good news was good news, right? Like we need to hear these stories. You're giving other people permission to be human when you do that.
So together, me and you, Selena, we are going to
Yes.
rehumanize workplaces.
Yes. Watch out, world.
And watch out, world. Here we come. So, the name of this podcast is Seismic Shift, and that's what my books are called, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, The Seismic Shift in You. What, from your perspective and standpoint, what seismic shifts are you seeing that are shaking up the way that you work and the way that you live?
Well, I'll tell you one, and it's that managers have never had such a big impact as they do now on employees' day-to-day experience. And I think we always knew they had a part, but there's this recent UKG study. I don't know if you heard about it, but it says that employees, the majority of employees, say their manager impacts their mental health more than their therapist or doctor and on par with their spouse. So, like, this relationship at work is everything when it comes to your well-being. It's not some inconsequential thing who your boss is. That's a huge seismic shift I'm seeing. One other thing that makes it tricky right now as a manager is employee skepticism is like at an all-time high.
Why do you think?
I think since 2020, we know that workplace engagement, trust, happiness has gone down. I think some of it is remote work and return to office, some schisms about that, and people feeling surveillance at times. I think that does not make a person happy, engaged, trusting. So I think that's part of it. I think more than ever, like trust has to be earned every day by being consistent. People are being very selective about who they follow. And so realize as a leader, trust is not automatic. They're not going to look at you and say, oh, you're my leader. You must have my best interest at heart.
So we've got two things. Managers have a greater effect than ever before on an employee's well-being, more than their own therapist or spouse. And there's a lack of trust and an increase in skepticism. So you have employees that are just kind of struggling to trust, right? And yet so dependent, their mental health is dependent on whether they have a good leader or not. That's why I'm sure why we saw the Great Resignation during the pandemic. People just said, peace freaking out. I don't like my boss. I don't like this company. I don't like how I'm treated. There's got to be a better way. They finally had time to really focus on what really matters. So at that time during the Great Resignation, and I call it the Great Reevaluation, the Great Reprioritization, I think employees all of a sudden had more power than they've ever had before. And now here's my hypothesis. Tell me what you think, Selena. Now that leaders are trying to get the power back, I think that's why some of them are overcorrecting and going back to command and control and saying, you have to be back in the office 5 days a week or else look for another job. That's just one way I think leaders, are trying to control a situation because they're feeling a little bit out of control. What do you think?
I think that's a great hypothesis and accurate. I talk about TikToks. I just watched a TikTok of a person getting scolded for their messenger being quiet for like a span of 8 minutes, like not being green lit and active. I mean, that to me was shocking and upsetting on another level. I saw another one of a person saying every keystroke on my computer, we've been told, is surveilled. and watched and the rate at which I do things, that is the opposite of trust. It is not going to work. And I think you're right. There's been a return to that, and it feels like desperate grasping for straws. It's the opposite of how you're going to get them to give discretionary effort, excitement, innovation, creativity. They're going to do the bare minimum because you're kind of harnessing them with the collar.
You're absolutely right. So when you just described, it brought a smile to my face when you described excitement, creativity, innovation, right? And I think about my leadership students. Those are the types of organizations they want to work for. They want to be excited about, they want to feel like what they're doing matters. They want to feel like they're adding value. So talk to us about that style of management and leadership. What does it take to create that exciting, innovative, creative environment?
Yes. Well, one that I'm really excited about and love teaching and coaching on is psychological safety. This wonderful ingredient that I know you know about, but that allows somebody on a team to feel they can take these little interpersonal risks. And it turns out those are not so little. They really add up to people feeling latitude to be creative, to be innovative. And you know this is happening on your team if people say things like, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest, or this is a guess, but I'm thinking it's X. There's a comfort, right, in kind of putting your first draft answer forward, knowing others might sharpen it, build off of it. There's not this, I'm going to keep things to myself and I best not share it unless it's perfect and airtight. That's the opposite of what you want for creativity. So I think it's really important, speaking of admitting mistakes, leaders hanging back and not being the first ones to speak, but saying, let's go around. I want to hear one opportunity you see and one concern you have about the new direction. Get them talking. What else do we do when we're building that psychological safety? We're admitting we don't know it all. Just like the ask 3 before you answer idea. You're coming out and saying, hey folks, I don't know. I don't have all the answers on this. I really need your perspectives to push back, to validate, to let me know how this genuinely is. So doing those things plant the seeds for that creativity, that excitement, that I won't be punished here if I offer you a good first draft idea or I hazard a guess.
Yeah, it goes back to what you and I both believe, that employees want to be seen and heard and cared about, and not scrutinized if they don't have the right answer or they did something wrong. I remember years ago I was coaching a team and they were telling me about their particular boss, and she would call them out and shame and blame them if they had one cell wrong in an Excel spreadsheet when they were presenting. And she said our team meetings were never about collaboration. It was about covering your CYA, right? And then you'd get called out if you got something wrong. And she said, and what that created was not cohesion, not collaboration, not risk-taking, not innovation, not creativity, but it just created fear, that all we were doing was trying to defend our jobs and our work to our boss every week. Like that is what we're saying. Please, leaders, don't shame and blame. Don't create a culture of fear, right?
Yes.
If you're in what did you say the stat was, Selena, on how many Gen Zs are going to be in the workplace in 5 years?
1/3 of the workforce, there'll be 1/3 of the workforce by 2030.
Yeah. So in 5 years, Gen Zs are going to make up 1/3 of the workplace. You are not going to be able to attract, retain, and engage Gen Zs if you scold them and create these cultures of fear, of shame and blame. You can't do it. And I don't know about you, but I continue to be surprised how many jerk bosses there are still out there.
I couldn't agree more. And so the thing is, Gen Z is coming. And if you think about how they were raised, it was this very participatory world, whether school projects, social media, gaming, they're giving their feedback and shaping outcomes in real time. imagine as that person then joining the work world and decisions are made behind closed doors. Emails sound like directives. Sometimes meetings are these monologues. There's going to be this mismatch, right? Because all the time, all the while, you're expected to execute flawlessly, even though you don't really have a voice and a say in things. So, my advice for leaders is co-create. Think input and involvement from this group rather than waiting till they're promoted to a certain level or senior enough to be taken seriously.
I love that advice. And I hope that that was a mic drop moment for me. And I hope for all of our listeners as well, because managers are struggling with, okay, what do we do with the Gen Zers? And and so the solution, according to Selena Rezvani, who's the real expert in this, is to co-create. So if you didn't understand that, co-create, and share, Selena, again, what exactly. So if they say, okay, co-create, give them some tips of what exactly they can do to co-create.
Sure. So one example would be, something really simple on a project. You might declare, this is the timeline we're going to use, or you could involve them in an early draft of the timeline and say, any thoughts or ideas before we put this in stone. And so sometimes it's just involving them earlier in a process to get their perspective, their inputs, their additions. Another thing you can do is task them on multi-generational teams on purpose. I had the great luck and fortune of being put on a team like that early in my career in management consulting. There were senior people, there was mid-level people, and there was me, this junior person. And what a wonderful opportunity to get to work on a project shaping the culture. That's what we were there to help improve. So staffing people intergenerationally on those internal initiatives, that's a great way to have them co-create and have a voice.
Gosh, keep going. I love these tips.
Yeah, and one even more everyday way to kind of share power, right? Not hoard it with Gen Z is, even your meetings, having them run a meeting or slicing up your agenda so that there are more voices in charge of parts of it. They don't want to wait 10 years to be given a leadership opportunity, right? They want it right away. So look around you at the small everyday moments where you could offer someone that leadership. I think one other thing for leaders that they can do is think about the things that might fall in your lap that maybe are no big deal to you, but that somebody at that junior level would jump to be part of. Maybe representing your organization at a conference or getting to go to a training offsite that's often offered to you. Or getting to saying something like, I'm going to step back from the client lunch next month. Would you like to represent our group instead? Might seem small to you, is often major to that person who's just coming up.
Gosh, those are great, great tips. I love it, Selena. You know what that reminds me of? One of a leaders who I coached years ago, he was able to take vacations and come back without being stressed. Whereas so many leaders say, gosh, the worst thing about going on vacation is I come back and I have so much work for me, or, things that I have to then catch up on. And yet, so then I went back to this leader and I said, what do you do when you're on vacation? He said, well, I don't say that I need to make up everything. I give all of the duties that were on my plate to my younger employees. So if there's a meeting that I was running, I'll tap Selena and say, Selena, can you take this meeting? He goes, I look at that week or two as leadership development for the next layer for my team. And I thought that was brilliant, right? And while you're gone, give them an opportunity to experience what you experience. I also love the piece of advice with meetings. So many leaders say, gosh, there's so much pressure on me. I'm always in charge of the agenda. At the very end, I say, any questions? There are no questions. I love what you said. Well, let's have shared agendas, shared meetings. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Just put Put Michelle in charge, put Selena in charge, put Robert in charge. Share those duties. That's what they want more of, the Gen Zs, shared duties. Or not shared duties, they want more experiences.
Right. And how could that not make you feel some more ownership in the team? My voice counts. I've been asked to lead this. I don't need to be tenured 15 years in order to have certain perks or credibility around here. That matters. And often it's these little things that are the most impactful.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So, as we're closing out this fantastic session with Selena Rezvani and her new book, Quick Leadership, can you just give everyone, all of the listeners, a synopsis, since your book just launched, of why leaders need to read Quick Leadership? Give us the why.
The why is it's very hard to be compassionate and understanding with others if you can't do that with yourself. And I address that in this book. Yes, it's about elevating other people, absolutely, but it's also about managing your own energy, knowing it's not infinite, right? Back to my dad's story and the big impact that had on my life. You have so much energy in a day. How can you be wise with that? How can you spend it well, and be a good model for others, right? So many tips in there, everything from how to really take your paid time off and unplug as a model for other people, making sure you take breaks during the day, let people see you doing that. Acknowledging you need to refuel or clear your mind. We need managers like this who are human, who leave loudly at the end of the day.
Gosh, I love it. I mean, you are preaching to the choir, girl. I am all in with what you're saying, and I believe in it passionately. Like we said in the very beginning of this podcast, is Selena and I believe that we need to rehumanize workplaces. If we want to attract and retain the top talent, we need to do things differently. And where does that start? It starts with the leaders. And I know it's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of opportunity to do things differently, to lead differently, with more authenticity, with more honesty. I love how you phrased it, co-creation, allowing, not even allowing, encouraging others to be a part of the process, not having all of the right answers, making sure that you too take breaks, you too take vacation, understanding that your energy is not infinite and that we have to hold it sacred, because we're not really good to anybody else unless we're first good to ourselves. So thank you so much, Selena Rezvani, for being on the Seismic Shift podcast. Thank you all all the listeners for making this podcast a top 10% global podcast. And thank you, Loyola University, New Orleans, for all of your support. Take care, y'all. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University, New Orleans for helping bring this content to life.